The airport terminal buzzed with the frustrated energy of delayed passengers. Flight 447 to Denver had been postponed 3 times already, and the gate area looked like a refugee camp. People sprawled across rows of seats, children whined, and the air crackled with collective irritation. Rachel Mitchell sat on the floor near the windows, her back against the wall, watching the scene with weary acceptance. At 29, she'd learned that some things were beyond her control. Flight delays were just one of many. She wore a soft peach blouse with billowy sleeves and a cream-colored skirt, an outfit she'd carefully chosen for her job interview that morning. The interview she'd probably bombed. Her phone battery was at 3%. Her book was finished. All she could do was wait and watch the drama unfold around her. That's when she noticed him. A man stood near the check-in desk. A little girl of maybe 3 years old balanced on his hip. He wore a gray blazer over dark jeans, his brown hair slightly disheveled in that way that somehow looked intentional. Even from a distance, Rachel could see the exhaustion in his posture. The child in his arms had her head on his shoulder, one small hand clutching the collar of his jacket. She wore pink leggings and a purple vest over a white shirt, her light brown curls falling across her face. The gate agent was shaking her head. Rachel couldn't hear the conversation, but she could read the body language. Bad news being delivered? The man's shoulders sagged further. He turned away from the desk, scanning the packed waiting area with obvious desperation. The little girl lifted her head and said something. He nodded, shifted her weight, and continued looking for somewhere to sit. There wasn't a single empty seat visible. Rachel watched him approach an older couple, gesturing to the empty seat beside them. They shook their heads, pointing to bags they'd placed there. He tried again with a businessman who pretended not to see him, earbuds firmly in place. The little girl started to cry, that exhausted, overwhelmed sound of a child who'd reached her limit. The man bounced her gently, murmuring something Rachel couldn't hear, but his face showed his own breaking point approaching. Rachel looked down at her boarding pass. Seat 14C. She'd paid extra for that seat. Money she couldn't really afford, because she'd wanted the window and the chance to actually sleep on the 5-hour flight. Money that had come from her dwindling savings account. The same account that was supposed to last until she found a new job. She looked back at the man and his daughter. The child was crying harder now, that hiccuping sob of pure misery. Other passengers were starting to stare, some with sympathy, others with irritation. Rachel made her decision before she could talk herself out of it. She stood, smoothed her skirt, and walked over to them. Up close, she could see the man was probably in his mid-30s, with brown eyes that held both intelligence and current desperation. Light stubble shadowed his jaw, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested multiple sleepless nights. "Excuse me," Rachel said quietly. He turned to her, and she saw him brace himself for another rejection. "Yes? I have a confirmed seat on this flight." She held out her boarding pass. "I'd like to give it to you and your daughter." The man stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. "What?" "My seat. 14C. You should take it. You both look like you could use it more than I can. I can't accept that." But his eyes had gone to the boarding pass like a lifeline. The little girl whimpered against his shoulder. "You can and you should. When's the next flight with availability?" Rachel kept her voice gentle but firm. "Not until tomorrow morning, but then you need this seat." "It's okay, really." Rachel pressed the boarding pass into his free hand. "I'll figure something out. This is incredibly kind, but I can't let you give up your seat. Do you have somewhere to stay? This is..." He gestured helplessly at the terminal. "This is too much." "I'll manage. I'm good at managing." Rachel smiled, hoping it looked more confident than she felt. "Your daughter needs to get home." "You need to get home." "Take the seat." The little girl lifted her head and looked at Rachel with tear-filled eyes. "I want to go home, Daddy, please." The man's face crumbled slightly at those words. He looked at Rachel, and she saw the moment he accepted. "Thank you. I don't even know what to say. How can I repay you?" "You don't need to repay me. Just get your little girl home safely. At least let me upgrade the seat. First class, I can..." "There is no first class on this flight. And even if there was, I'm giving you my seat. Not selling it." Rachel's voice was kind but firm. Sometimes people just help each other. "That's all." The man looked like he wanted to argue further, but the gate agent was calling for boarding. The little girl perked up slightly at the sound. "What's your name?" he asked. Rachel Mitchell. "I'm Connor. Connor Blake. And this is my daughter, Sophie." He shifted Sophie slightly. "Rachel, I won't forget this. I promise." "Safe travels, Sophie," Rachel said, giving the little girl a small wave. Sophie managed a tiny smile through her tears. Rachel watched them board, then went back to her spot by the windows. She pulled out her phone, down to 2% battery now, and checked her bank account. She had enough for a night at an airport hotel. Barely. It would leave her with almost nothing until she found work. But she'd figure it out. She always did. The reality of what she'd just done started to settle in. The job interview that morning had been for a position in Denver, coordinating youth programs for a community center. Her dream job. The kind of work she'd always wanted to do. But she'd stumbled over questions. Felt her anxiety get the better of her. Watched the interviewer's face grow politely distant. She'd been planning to spend the flight processing her, disappointment and planning her next steps. Now she'd be spending the night at an airport hotel, flying out tomorrow on a ticket she'd have to rebook, probably with a change fee she couldn't afford. For a moment, doubt crept in. Had she been stupid? Impulsive? That money mattered. That seat mattered. But then she remembered the exhaustion in Connor Blake's face, the tears on little Sophie's cheeks, and she knew she'd made the right choice. Some things mattered more than money. Rachel's phone died completely. She sighed, gathered her small carry-on, and went to find out about hotel options. The next morning, Rachel boarded her rescheduled flight with a new boarding pass that had cost her $40 she didn't have to spare. She'd slept poorly in the budget hotel, worried about her finances, about her future, about the growing list of things she needed to figure out. She found her seat, tucked her bag in the overhead compartment, and settled in for the flight home. Home to her studio apartment in Denver. Home to job searching and budget meals and trying to figure out how she'd ended up 29 and starting over again. The flight was uneventful. Rachel dozed, daydreamed, tried not to think about her dwindling options. When they landed in Denver, she grabbed her bag and made her way through the airport, toward ground transportation. That's when she heard someone call her name. Rachel Mitchell. She turned to find Connor Blake walking toward her, his daughter Sophie holding his hand. They both looked considerably more rested than they had the day before. Connor wore jeans and a dark sweater now, and Sophie skipped along beside him in a little denim dress. "Connor," Rachel said, surprised. "Hi, I'm glad you made it home okay." "Thanks to you." He stopped in front of her, his expression serious. "I've been trying to figure out how to find you. I called the airline, explained the situation. They wouldn't give me your contact information, obviously, but they said you were on this morning's flight. I took a chance you hadn't left the airport yet. You came back to the airport to find me?" "I did, because I need to thank you properly, and I need to ask you something." Connor glanced at Sophie, who was watching Rachel with shy curiosity. "Sophie, can you say thank you to Miss Rachel?" "Thank you," Sophie said softly. "You gave us your airplane seat." Rachel's heart melted. "You're very welcome, sweetheart." Connor pulled an envelope from his pocket. "I want you to have this. Please, before you say no, just listen. Inside is a check reimbursing you for your ticket, the hotel you had to stay at, the rebooking fee, and enough extra to cover the inconvenience. It's the least I can do." Rachel held up her hand. "Connor, no. I didn't do it for money. I did it because you and Sophie needed help. I know. That's what makes this so important to me." Connor's voice grew quiet. "Rachel, I'm the CEO of Blake Technologies. I spend my days in boardrooms with people who wouldn't give up a seat if their life depended on it. Everyone wants something. Everyone has an angle. And then you appeared, offering help with no expectation of anything in return. Do you have any idea how rare that is? I'm not special. Anyone would have. No, they wouldn't have. I asked 4 different people before you appeared. They all said no." Connor held out the envelope. "Please take it. Not as payment, but because I can afford it and you shouldn't bear a financial burden for being kind." Rachel hesitated, then slowly took the envelope. "Thank you. This is very generous. There's something else. What do you do for work, Rachel?" "I'm looking right now, actually. I was in Boston for a job interview yesterday. That's why I was at the airport." "What kind of work?" Youth programs, community outreach. I have a degree in social work and education. I like helping people, especially kids. She smiled ruefully, though I'm not great at selling myself in interviews. Connor and Sophie exchanged a look. Then Connor said, Blake Technologies has a family foundation. We fund community programs, education initiatives, youth development. We're looking for someone to direct those programs. Someone who understands what communities actually need, who cares about making a real difference rather than just looking good in press releases. He paused. Would you be interested in interviewing for the position? Rachel's mouth fell open. Are you offering me a job because I gave you my airplane seat? I'm offering you an interview because you demonstrated the exact kind of character and priorities we want in someone running our charitable programs. Someone who helps people even when it costs them something. Someone who sees a need and responds without calculating the benefit to themselves. Connor smiled. The airplane seat just showed me who you are. The interview will determine if you're qualified, but I suspect you are. I don't know what to say. Say you'll come in next week for an interview. Meet with our foundation director, see the programs, learn about what we do. No obligations, just a conversation. Connor handed her a business card. My direct number is on there. Call my assistant and she'll set it up. Rachel looked down at the card, her mind reeling. Yesterday, she'd been certain her luck had run out. Today, possibility was blooming like flowers after rain. Okay, she said. Yes, I'll call. Good. Connor crouched down to Sophie's level. Say goodbye to Miss Rachel, sweetheart. Bye, Sophie said, then surprised Rachel by stepping forward and hugging her legs. Thank you for being nice. Rachel blinked back sudden tears. You're welcome, Sophie. After they left, Rachel opened the envelope with shaking hands. The check inside was for $1,500, far more than her ticket and hotel had cost. She read the note tucked inside. For your kindness and for reminding me that good people still exist, please accept this with gratitude. Connor Blake. The interview the following week went better than any interview Rachel had ever had. The foundation director was a warm woman named Margaret, who spent 2 hours showing Rachel their programs and asking thoughtful questions about her ideas and experience. There was no stumbling over answers, no anxiety. Rachel talked about her work with kids, her vision for community programs, her belief that real change came from listening to what people actually needed. 3 days later, they offered her the job. Director of Community Programs for the Blake Foundation. More than she'd ever made. Benefits. A chance to actually make a difference. Rachel called her mother in tears. I got the job, Mom. A really good job. One I actually care about. I'm so proud of you, honey. How did this happen? Rachel thought about the airport. The exhausted father and crying child. The decision to give up her seat. I helped someone, she said simply. And it turned out to be exactly the right person to help. 6 months later, Rachel stood in a community center in Denver, watching kids participate in an after-school program she'd developed. Art, homework help, mentorship, the kind of program she'd wished for when she was growing up. Connor appeared beside her, Sophie holding his hand. This looks great, Rachel. Everything you've built here is exceeding our expectations. Thank you. It feels good to see it come together. Sophie tugged on Rachel's hand. Miss Rachel? Can I paint? Of course you can. There's an easel right over there. They watched Sophie carefully make her way to the art station. Then Connor said, You know, I think about that day at the airport a lot. How close I came to not finding help. How different things could have been if you hadn't been there. I was just trying to do the right thing. That's my point. You didn't hesitate. You saw someone struggling and you helped, even though it cost you something. Connor turned to face her. That's who you are, Rachel. And it's made all the difference. Not just for me and Sophie that day, but for every kid who comes through these doors. You changed my life by giving up an airplane seat. Now you're changing these kids' lives too. Rachel felt emotion tighten her throat. I'm just glad I was there when you needed someone. So am I, Connor smiled. More than you know. As Rachel watched Sophie paint, surrounded by other children laughing and learning, she thought about how strange life could be. How one small act of kindness could ripple outward in ways you never imagined. How the worst days could lead to the best outcomes if you stayed true to who you were. She'd given up a seat on an airplane. In return, she'd found purpose. meaningful work, and a reminder that goodness still mattered in the world. Sometimes the best investments aren't the ones you make for yourself. Sometimes they're the ones you make for someone else, expecting nothing in return. And sometimes those investments pay dividends you never could have predicted. Rachel had learned that kindness wasn't transactional. You didn't help people because you expected something back. You helped them because it was right. But every once in a while, the universe had a way of rewarding that kindness anyway. Not with money or jobs or material things, but with something more valuable. The knowledge that who you are matters, that your choices have meaning, and that sometimes giving up what you need most is exactly how you find what you were looking for all along. In Rachel's case, she'd given up an airplane seat and found her way home.